Welcome to Expedition Networking, a special segment of the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and your host for this program. For those of you who are familiar, on the Networking RX podcast, we share information and have conversations with experts, such as authors, researchers, and social scientists. And all of these programs are aimed at helping you learn how to become better at building professional relationships and understanding why they work. In this Expedition Networking segment, however, we're going to bring on successful entrepreneurs and unique professionals and explore their networking adventure and learn how they used relationships to create lasting success. What I learned through what I call the COVID lockdown is, and I got on Zoom, talked to a lot of people. It just opened my eyes to the number of different types of networking organizations that are out there. Yes, I know AmSpirit Business Connections very well. It's my organization. I should. I've known of BNI. I know of BNI. I know people in BNI. I didn't know quite as many. But the other thing I have found is that there are lots and lots of different types of organizations out there, and I won't go through a litany of names. There are lots of them, and they're all good, and they all cater to a certain type of person. I use ice cream as an example. Some people like vanilla, some people chocolate, some people it's chocolate mint, whatever. We all have different tastes, and people have all sorts of different tastes. So anyhow, recently I was introduced to Carl Lucci, and Carl has his own unique story about networking. He was an innovator. He developed several groups down in the Tampa Bay area that were face-to-face groups, and had his own epiphany of how some people wanted to be served, and took that and went with it. Carl, welcome to the program.
Hey, Frank, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I guess take us back in time, how you got started with your programs in the Tampa area, and what you learned and where it's going. And
okay. Well, I had a previous business life where I was a business developer, and I worked for a multimillionaire, and then I left that and I had to decide what I was going to do. And so I went home, and then somebody invited me to this thing called a networking meeting. I'd never been to one, didn't know what they were. And so I went to one. It was called FNI. It was Free Networking International. It was in the Tampa Bay area. And I went to it and I saw what happened. Typical, you go in, you shake hands for a few minutes, and then everybody does an elevator pitch, and everything everybody normally does at a lot of these meetings. And I didn't really get it. I didn't understand it. It was quite social. And the fellow at the head of the room, he had about 35, 40 people in the room. It was at a restaurant. And so afterwards, I heard about these one-on-ones or one-to-ones, and I asked him, I said, could I have one of these with you? I'd like to find out a little bit more about this. And he said, sure. So we met the following week, and I told him, I said, well, how does this work? So he gave me his concept of what networking was, that they made it like a social activity, but where people would meet, get to know, like each other, hopefully get to trust them, and then hopefully they get referrals or do business together. And I thought, oh, well, that's a fairly easy concept, it sounded like to me. And so I asked him, I said, how do you make any money at this? It's free, right? And he said, yeah, it's free Networking International. And he said, well, I'm really not making any money at it. And I said, oh, okay. How many members do you have? He said, I think I got about 6,000 or 8,000 in the Tampa Bay area. I've got about 15 locations that we do. And he says, I make a little bit of money because the different directors I have, they have to pay me to have their location, but it's not a lot of money. And he said, but I thought that people were going to buy my books and go to my classes on networking. He says, I found out when you do it free, they wanted everything free. And so they just didn't follow. And I said, well, that's interesting, because this was totally foreign to me. I had no idea. And I said, well, does it work? He said, well, yeah, it works for some people. Some people it doesn't. He said, but I'm actually backing away from it. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no, he says, I just don't think that, it's right for me. And I said, wow, okay. He says, yeah, I'm giving it to a couple girls over in Tampa, and we were in St. Pete, Clearwater area. And so I had that meeting and I went home and I thought, I was a business developer in my previous life. And I thought, I need to do something about this. So I was learning about websites and how to design them. And I thought, maybe I'll buy a domain name and I'm going to see if Tampa Bay Networkers is available. And so I went and I bought it. And, it cost me $1 or something from GoDaddy.
Right.
So I bought the domain name. And then I thought, wouldn't it be kind of cool if these people had a place that could go online and do this? Now, this was in, this was 2009. Okay.
Right.
And so I created this very, amateurish website, so to speak, but it had a profile page and I had ways that people could join and they could get in and they could find out about other people and they could contact them. And I thought, now maybe I can monetize this. So I asked for another one-to-one with this guy. And I said, what do you think about this? I said, this would be for everybody, in the Tampa Bay area. And I don't know anybody, everybody, you got 6,000 people. Why don't we charge them like $50 a year? And he said, I don't know, I'm going to back away. So wait a minute. Now I bought the domain name. I got this website. Here it is. And I said, there's nothing like it out there. And it was kind of like a little bit like LinkedIn, a little bit like Facebook, a little bit,
Sure.
And there wasn't any of that at the time. And so he said, well, no, I don't think so. I said, well, I really want to do something with this now that I started it. He said, well, you can go around and do it. I said, yeah, but if everybody knows you, if we only you got 6,000 people, if we get 2,000 of those people, I'm going to give you half that money just because you're the one pushing it. They don't know me. No, I don't want to do it. So honestly, it kind of pissed me off.
Yeah.
So I started going to all his different group meetings and he had them all over Tampa Bay area. And I kept telling people about this and they weren't getting it. And you only have to hit me over the head about 6 times asking me, well, where are your meetings? And I said, I don't have meetings. I wasn't interested in having a group or meetings. So finally I thought, well, maybe I should. So I started Tampa Bay Networkers. It's there today if people want to see it, tampabaynetworkers.com, but I turned it into a portal for other people's meetings. I don't have my own on there, and I'll tell you about that later. So I started going around and people were joining, and I ended up after about 7 years of doing this, because I cloned my meetings after his, exact same way I saw his done, because I knew nothing else. I didn't even know there was a BNI, or you pick 3 letters, there's a group somewhere called that, right? Mm-hmm. So I started having my meetings, and I met tons of people. I mean, I don't know, Frank, I probably sat down with 1,000 people in 7 years. I really don't know. But I also noticed something. I was sitting right here in this chair in 2017, and I'm thinking, this is really not working. I don't think people are getting out of it what they want to get out of it. And I did some researching. I'm a research nut. And I found out that most people quit networking in their first year. Most people just don't follow through. And there had to be a reason for it. Well, I was always taught you can't fix anything unless you know why it's not working. So I literally quit networking in 2017. I stopped my own meetings. I allowed other people to have their own. If they wanted to call it Joe's Networking, they could. And I let them use the website. And there's only one group in there right now that's local, and it's face-to-face. And so I tore it apart. And I took networking from the time you left your house, because this was all face-to-face. There was no Zoom. The time you left your house, the time you got to the meeting, to the time you passed out business cards, the time you this, that, and the other, every activity. And I figured out why I feel that it doesn't work for most people. Some people it works for fine, but I think it has more to do with the individual than it does the process when it does work. Yeah. So I felt that the process didn't work very well. So I started taking the different areas that I thought were problems, and we can discuss that if you want. And I came up with a formula that I felt might work, but I didn't know I had to test it. Well, I researched it before I started testing this until 2019. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll do some local workshops and I'll test it. I'll get feedback. So I would do these at a local restaurant. and I'd get about 25 people in there. I charged them $15 to come in, and bought their lunch. So I netted about $3 a head on each one of them if I was lucky. And I went over each one of these areas, and people's jaws were dropping because I was proposing they not do the things that were being done at the conventional networking meetings. But I was also starting to get feedback. Carl, I'm not networking as much, but I'm getting better results. And so I thought, well, maybe I'm onto something. So I thought maybe I'll just continue doing these workshops. And then at some point, maybe I'll form another group,
right,
and apply it. And then, as you know, COVID hit. And so I couldn't do that anymore. The restaurants didn't want people in there in quantities, and people didn't want to go. So along came a group called, a platform online called Alignable, and I joined it. Wasn't really too pleased with the way it was set up, but it was interesting. And then someone contacted me because I had spoken to their founder and told him we had a different discussion about networking. But he or somebody said, would I mind joining about a dozen people to put together alignable groups? They wanted to have a thing where there were groups and people would join that for different categories, and then also possibly set up where they would have events. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I'll Zoom. And this was based out of California. So I went for about 2.5 years working with them, trying to help form these groups and the meetings. And in the back of my mind, I wanted it done in a fashion that I liked, but it wasn't my platform. So they did it the way they do it. And they do it in the conventional manner, and that's fine. It's their platform. And then I didn't want to start a group. Some of them started a group pretty early, but I actually started my group in late 2020, and I called it I Refuse to Fail, with the idea that instead of training people to network, I would just have people they would be allowed to join, but they had to follow the guide that I had set forth, and we had to be in agreement on that. And so fast forward today, I have a group called I Refuse to Fail, and then we do have free online meetings every week called 15 plus 30s. So that's how I got to where I am with networking, and how I came to my unconventional way of networking.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I don't want to call it unconventional, because who's to say who's weird, who's to say who's normal. I just think what you've done is you've served a sector of people. You are serving a sector of people that they want it their way. And
yeah, it's not for everybody. I mean,
no.
I don't expect it to be. In fact, I turn down more people than I allow in.
Right. Well, I one of my many sayings, there are 8 billion people on the planet. There's enough business for all of us. There's enough
absolutely.
people. And but for years, the predominant model was, the LTIP or the BNI, and that was it. And now you see I don't want to say a proliferation, because they probably always have been there, but it's opened my eyes that there are lots. Oh, they've got a neat way that they do it.
Yeah.
I sat in on I Refuse to Fail, and that's a unique way.
Sure.
Now, is that going to resonate with members of AmSpirit Business Connections? Some it will, some it won't.
Sure.
And vice versa. And that's true of lots of different things. And it's just how we all learn different ways. Some people like audiobooks. Some people like to read a book. People who like to read a book like it on a Kindle or in that platform. Some people like to hold the book and like to be, like to hold the book. Some people who like to hold the book, I'm glad going to the library and just checking it out. And other people want to have a damn copy of it so they can mark it up. We have options. And I think that's what you have done, is just really kind of built options out there.
Well, one of the one thing that I had in my mind that everybody networked for the same reason, and that's just not so. I started the organization because, being a business consultant, you're not gonna believe this, Frank, but I don't know everything.
Oh, well, there you go. Me neither.
I just don't know everything. So I figured this was a way for me to meet people that knew things that either I didn't know or didn't want to know or didn't want to do, that when I came across somebody that I was consulting, in their business, I could refer them. So I thought, okay, that's what I thought networking was. I thought everybody did that. I thought that the idea was to build a team of unpaid salespeople that you could basically, help out, and they could help you. So, but I found out very quickly that most people, especially if they do an elevator sales pitch, which most of them do, they are selling. And they're there. Hopefully somebody's going to buy what they have, or they're going to give them referrals for somebody to buy. Okay. And my concept is a little different. Okay. So I evidently either I got it wrong or maybe there's no wrong. Maybe everybody just networks for a different reason. And so
I don't think you have it wrong at all.
Well, okay.
I think you have it totally right.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But I will tell you, the majority of people
I know
are there to sell. And one of the things I talked about in this workshop was I asked people, I'd say, have you ever gone to an after hours event where there was 100 people or so? And they'd say, yes. Well, how many people did you really meet with? The number came up to average about 6.
Okay.
And so it really didn't matter whether it was 6 people in a room or 600 people in a room. You only met with 6. And I said, why did you go? Oh, I went there to build relationships. I said, did you go there to build relationships, or were you told that's what networking was to build relationships? Well, I went there, I wanted to meet people. And I said, but you went there to sell. And there's nothing wrong with that because you're in business. You did, if you were just going for a relationship, why the hell didn't you go to a bar? A lot of people go to bars and half of them are drunk, and you can really build relationships there, I said, so you went there to sell, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's the approach you use when you are there. Okay. How are you going to get that person? I met my wife in a bar, but I didn't go up and say, hey, I'm Carl and I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. Let's get married. And we went and got married. It just didn't work that way. It takes time. You have to get to know, like, and trust. So once I got that out of the way, I said, well, let me ask you this. And I'd have like 30 people. And I said, how many of you went there to buy something? To this day, Frank, I've never had anybody said I go networking to buy things. So I said, if you got 100 people in a room that are going there to sell and 100 people there not going to buy, what happens? Nothing, unless you know the proper way to build that relationship over time. And so,
that's why I say you're right.
Okay.
I think you're totally right. People, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Well, I think that's pure evidence that you're right. And I try to walk people through that same logic.
Yeah.
Do you like to be sold? No, I don't.
Right.
Then what makes you think that selling is going to work at these events?
It doesn't work. And I mean, it can, even a blind squirrel gets a nut once in a while, right?
Sure.
But the thing is that's not good enough for you to be a successful networker. Okay. And it's either an integral part of your business or it's not. So why not do it right? And show up on time, do all the right things. And it is a very simple concept, I feel, very simple, but it's not easy because you got to do something.
Yeah.
And people are always looking for a magic pill. Oh, all I got to do is go network. I'm going to meet Frank. Frank's going to love me. He's going to buy what I have, or he's going to call Aunt Mary, and Aunt Mary's going to call me and buy some. It just doesn't work that way. You know that, and I know that. And really, they know that, but they don't want to admit it sometimes, I don't feel.
Yeah.
So that's why I did the workshops, and I wasn't doing, this is not a moneymaker for me. I'm doing this because I'm trying to change one brain at a time, I guess, to think differently about their own success, and if they pick up on it, fine. If they don't, that's okay. Keep doing things the way you've been doing them, and maybe you'll get better results. I don't know.
Well, I think what you're doing, obviously resonates with certain people,
right?
Because
it's starting to work. It's taking some time.
Well, you've got a following, and that following will bring in other people, and
Sure.
And that'll create success, and momentum will build.
Mm-hmm.
You're catering to an audience that has a real thirst for what you're doing. I find it very interesting. For our listeners, go to I refuse to the number 2 fail. I'll put this in the show notes. But I assume you can get your newsletter there or get on your mailing list because
We have I have it. If when they get there, there's a place where it says free meetings and events. They can click that page. There's a little video explains so they know what to expect. And then there's a form to request an invitation. And they can either opt into a reminder list that I send out once a week, or just that, hey, we got a meeting, and they can add it to their calendar, whatever they want to do. So, and then I'll get to show up.
Yeah, what I appreciate about your reminders is there's always a little bit of tidbit of information in there.
Oh yeah, I try to throw something in there.
Yeah. And so they're meant to be read. I was reading them. It's like, okay, yeah, that's insightful. Yeah. That's a good reminder. So, get a hold of you through iRefuseToFail.com. Best way to get a hold of you, Carl?
Yeah. The number 2, iRefuseToFail.com, or info@iRefuse2fail.com.
Okay. I'll get that in the show notes for sure.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate your time on here today. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. Thanks a lot. I'll see you at your next meeting.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.